Welcome to the Sleeping Archive, where history comes alive through the voices of those who lived it.
The candlelight flickers against the stone walls of the Hôtel de Brionne, casting shadows that seem to dance with secrets. My name is Geneviève Moreau, and I am 25 years old, though I feel as if I have aged a decade in these past months. The revolution promised us liberty, equality, fraternity. What it gave me was a desk, a quill, and lists of names that grow longer each day. I work for the Committee of Public Safety, a name that sounds so noble, so necessary. Citizen Robespierre himself established our purpose, to protect the revolution from its enemies, both foreign and domestic. Yet as I sit here in this cramped office, copying names onto execution orders, I wonder if we have become the very thing we sought to destroy. The ink is always cold when I begin my work each morning. The committee provides us with the finest paper, ironic, considering how many citizens cannot afford bread. But perhaps that is fitting. Death, after all, demands its proper documentation. Citizen Moreau, calls Henri Duval from across the room. He is my supervisor, a thin man with nervous hands who joined the revolution early, and now wears his fervor like armor. The morning dispatches from Citizen Saint-Just have arrived. Saint-Just, the angel of death, as some whisper when they think no one is listening. Though at 26 he is barely older than I, his words carry the weight of the guillotine. Every recommendation he makes, every name he suggests, finds its way to my desk and then to the scaffold. I take the papers from Henri's trembling fingers. His hands shake more each day, I notice. Perhaps it is the cold. This winter of 1794 bites deep into our bones. Or perhaps it is something else entirely. The first name on today's list is Marie-Catherine Lavoisier. I recognize it immediately, wife of the chemist Antoine Lavoisier, who was executed just last month. We need no more scientists. Citizen Marat had declared before his own death, the revolution has no need for genius. Now the wife follows the husband. I wonder if she knows yet, if she is still arranging flowers in her cell, believing that tomorrow might bring freedom. My quill scratches against the paper, each letter forming with mechanical precision, M-A-R-I-E. The sound echoes in the small room like footsteps on cobblestones. Catherine tells me she dreams of footsteps now. Her neighbor, Citizen Beaumont, confided this to me yesterday while we waited in line for our bread rations. She said the footsteps come for her each night, climbing the stairs to her apartment, stopping at her door. But when she opens it, no one is there. I understand her dreams. We all hear footsteps now. The revolution began with such hope. I remember standing in the crowd outside the Bastille 4 years ago, my heart soaring as the stones fell. I was 21 then, working as a seamstress in the Faubourg Saint-Antoine. The shop owner, Madame Guillaume, had given us the afternoon off to witness history. This day will change everything, she said, her eyes bright with tears of joy. She was right, though not in the way any of us expected. Madame Guillot's shop was seized 6 months ago, hoarding fabric for aristocrats, the charges read. She tried to explain that the silk was for a wedding dress, for a merchant's daughter, but explanations have become dangerous luxuries. The tribunal did not listen. They rarely do any more. I dip my quill again. The ink spreads like blood across the nib. Jean-Baptiste Carrier is the next name. He is 17, younger than my brother was when the revolution began. The charges against him read, counter-revolutionary activities, but the details are vague. He was caught singing the wrong song, perhaps, or wearing the wrong colors. In these times, youth is no protection. If anything, it makes one more suspect. The young are dangerous, Citizen Robespierre says. They have not learned to control their passions for the good of the Republic. My apartment is a 10-minute walk from the committee offices, through streets that grow more familiar and more foreign each day, the same cobblestones, the same narrow alleys, but different faces, or rather, fewer faces. Some have fled Paris seeking safety in the countryside. Others have simply disappeared. Last week, I walked past the bakery where I used to buy my morning bread. The windows were boarded up, and someone had painted "Enemy of the People" across the door in red letters that looked disturbingly like dried blood. Citizen Lepin, the baker, had been arrested for spreading counter-revolutionary propaganda. His crime: complaining too loudly about the flour rations. His wife, Sophie, used to give extra bread to the children in our quarter. She had kind eyes and flour-dusted hands that were always warm when she handed you your loaf. I heard she tried to visit him in the conciergerie prison, but they turned her away. "No visitors for enemies of the state," the guard told her. She has not been seen since she made that attempt. The candle burns lower as I work through the evening list. Tomorrow's executions require tonight's paperwork, and the committee expects precision. Each name must be copied exactly, each charge recorded without error. A single mistake could delay justice, and delays are not tolerated. Pierre-François Sommier, age 34, merchant, charged with profiteering and counter-revolutionary activities. The evidence against him consists of testimony from 3 neighbors who claim he sold goods above the maximum price set by the convention. His shop was searched, and they found letters from his brother in England, letters written 2 years ago before the war, but letters nonetheless from an enemy nation. In these times, correspondence is conspiracy. I knew Pierre-François by sight. He lived 2 streets from my lodgings, and I would see him walking to market each morning with his small daughter. She could not have been more than 5 years old, with dark curls that bounced as she skipped beside him. He would buy her an apple when the vendors had them, and she would save half for later, wrapping it carefully in her handkerchief. Such restraint in one so young. It spoke well of her character and his teaching. I wonder what will become of her now. The revolution has created many orphans. The state promises to care for them, to raise them as proper citizens of the Republic, but promises and reality have grown distant cousins in these days. My hand cramps from writing, but I continue. The list seems endless tonight. 37 names in total. 37 lives that will end with the fall of tomorrow's blade. The committee's work has expanded beyond aristocrats and obvious enemies. We now hunt for more subtle threats, the lukewarm supporters, the secret sympathizers, those whose revolutionary ardor lacks the proper intensity. Citizen Robespierre calls them enemies within the revolution itself, more dangerous than foreign armies because they corrupt from inside. The candle gutters and dies, leaving me in darkness with only the scratching of my colleagues' quills to mark the passing time. In this darkness, I can almost forget the names I have written, the lives I have processed. Almost, but not quite.
Dawn arrives grey and cold, seeping through the narrow windows of the committee offices like an unwelcome truth. I have slept little. Sleep has become a luxury I can ill afford, both for practical and psychological reasons. The practical: there is always more work, more lists, more names to process. The psychological: sleep brings dreams, and dreams bring faces I would rather not see. This morning I arrive at the offices to find unusual activity. Citizen Fouquier-Tinville, the public prosecutor, paces the main corridor with his distinctive nervous energy. His presence here, rather than at the Revolutionary Tribunal, suggests something significant is developing. He nods to me as I pass. We have worked together on many cases, and he knows the quality of my documentation. "Citizen Moreau," he calls out, his voice carrying the authoritative tone that has condemned hundreds. "Your lists from last evening, they require special attention today. The committee has received new information about several of the cases." New information. The phrase makes my stomach tighten. In my experience, new information rarely leads to pardons or reduced sentences. More often, it expands the web of suspicion, drawing in associates, family members, anyone connected to the original accused. The revolution has taught us that guilt spreads like plague. One infected contact can contaminate dozens.
Henri approaches with a stack of additional documents. His hands shake more violently today. and I notice dark circles beneath his eyes that speak of sleepless nights. These came from Citizen Saint-Just's office this morning, he says, lowering his voice despite our secure location. Priority cases, they require immediate processing. The new documents contain names I recognize, faces from my daily life in Paris. Citizen Moreau, no relation despite the shared surname, who operated a small cafe near my lodgings. Marie-Claire Dubois, who sold newspapers on the corner of Rue Saint-Honoré. Even Father Benedict, the constitutional priest who had sworn allegiance to the revolution and regularly preached republican virtues from his pulpit. The charges vary, but the pattern remains consistent. Insufficient revolutionary enthusiasm, suspicious associations, counter-revolutionary sentiment. The evidence consists mainly of witness testimony, neighbors reporting overheard conversations, customers describing inappropriate reactions to news of executions, parishioners noting the priest's reluctance to celebrate the execution of former colleagues. As I begin copying these new names, I remember a conversation with my landlady, Madame Petit, just 2 weeks ago. She had mentioned seeing increased activity around Citizen Moreau's cafe, men in uniform taking notes, observing the customers, recording who came and went. "They're watching everyone now," she whispered, her voice barely audible despite the privacy of her own kitchen. "Even the ones who support the revolution aren't safe if they don't support it enough." Madame Petit herself has become increasingly careful about her words. Before the revolution, she was known throughout our quarter for her sharp tongue and willingness to gossip about anyone and everyone. Now she speaks in measured phrases, carefully neutral, expressing only the most orthodox Republican sentiments. The transformation is so complete that it feels like living with a stranger who happens to share the same face and apartment. The morning progresses with its familiar rhythm of documentation and bureaucracy. Other clerks arrive and take their positions at nearby desks. We exchange polite nods but few words. Conversation has become dangerous even among colleagues. Last month, Citizen Valier was arrested after a fellow clerk reported him for expressing sympathy toward executed nobles. They were human beings, after all, he had said during a moment of fatigue-induced candor. Such humanity is now classified as counter-revolutionary sentiment. Around 10 o'clock, Citizen Couthon arrives for his weekly inspection. Jean-Marie Couthon, Robespierre's close ally and fellow member of the Committee of Public Safety, wheels himself through our offices with methodical attention to detail. His paralyzed legs do not diminish his authority. If anything, his physical limitations seem to intensify his revolutionary fervor. He reviews our work with eyes that miss nothing, noting efficiency, accuracy, and most importantly, proper revolutionary spirit in our documentation. "Citizen Moreau," he addresses me directly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Your work continues to meet the high standards our republic demands. The precision of your lists has been noted by the tribunal judges." I bow my head appropriately. "I serve the Republic with all my capabilities, Citizen Couthon." Indeed, and the Republic requires ever greater service from its most dedicated citizens. He pauses, studying me with intensity that makes my skin crawl. "We have received reports of increased counter-revolutionary activity in your quarter of the city. Your familiarity with the residents there could prove valuable to our investigations." The implication is clear, though unstated. I am being asked, no, instructed to inform on my neighbors, to transform my daily life into an extension of my official duties. The line between Geneviève the clerk and Geneviève the citizen is being erased, replaced by a single identity, Geneviève the instrument of revolutionary justice. Of course, Citizen Couthon, I remain vigilant in all aspects of my service to the Republic. He nods approvingly and continues his inspection, but his words echo in my mind as I return to my copying. How many of my neighbors have already become suspicious in the eyes of the committee? How many of the faces I see each day at the baker, the market, the fountain where we gather our water are already marked for investigation? The afternoon brings a new crisis that illustrates the expanding scope of our surveillance. Citizen Hebert, editor of the radical newspaper Le Père du Chêne, has been arrested along with his followers. These Hebertists, as they are known, were once considered among the most extreme supporters of the revolution. Their crime? Challenging Robespierre's authority and demanding even more aggressive measures against the enemies of the people. The irony is not lost on me as I process their arrest orders. These men helped create the very machinery that now destroys them. Hébert himself wrote dozens of articles demanding harsher treatment of suspected counter-revolutionaries. His newspaper celebrated each execution, each new law that expanded the definition of treason. Now he sits in the same cells as the aristocrats, and moderates he helped condemn. Henri brings me the Hébert documents with hands that shake so violently he can barely hold the papers. "They're arresting the ultras now," he whispers, using the term for the most radical revolutionaries. If Hébert isn't pure enough, then who is? It is a dangerous question, one that touches the heart of our current situation. The revolution has become a serpent devouring its own tail, each faction purging the others in an endless cycle of ideological refinement. Today's hero becomes tomorrow's traitor with the shift of political winds. As I copy Hébert's information, I remember meeting him once at a public festival. It was last summer, during the Festival of the Supreme Being that Robespierre had organized to replace the old religious celebrations. Hébert had been drunk on wine and revolutionary fervor, proclaiming to anyone who would listen that France was being purged of all corruption, that they were creating a new race of virtuous citizens. "The old world is dying," he had shouted, gesturing wildly at the crowd gathered around the altar of the fatherland. "We are midwives to the birth of perfect humanity." The crowd had cheered, caught up in his enthusiasm and the spectacle of the moment. Now that same crowd would cheer his execution with equal enthusiasm. Public opinion has become as fluid as water, shaped entirely by whatever the committee declares to be truth on any given day. The revolution continues its feast, and there are always more courses to serve. 3 weeks have passed since the execution of Hébert and his followers, and the atmosphere in the committee offices has grown even more tense, if such a thing were possible. We process our daily lists with mechanical precision, but underlying conversations, those whispered exchanges that once provided brief moments of human connection, have virtually ceased. Fear has become our most reliable colleague. This morning brings troubling news that will reshape our work once again. Citizen Danton, Georges Danton, hero of the early revolution, the man whose voice could rouse crowds to storm barricades, has been arrested along with his supporters. If Hébert's fall shocked us with its implications, Danton's arrest feels like the ground shifting beneath our feet. I remember Danton from the early days, when his massive frame and booming voice made him seem like a force of nature unleashed upon the old regime. He was the revolution incarnate, passionate and uncompromising, yet also capable of mercy and moderation when circumstances demanded. His famous declaration that "we must dare, and dare again, and always dare," became a rallying cry for Republicans across France. Now that same daring has been redefined as dangerous moderation. The charges against Danton read like a catalogue of political evolution: corruption, secret negotiations with enemies of the Republic, conspiracy to restore the monarchy, and, most damning in our current climate, attempts to slow the pace of revolutionary justice. As I copy his information into our official records, I reflect on how thoroughly the revolution has transformed not just our society but our language itself. Words that once carried positive meanings have become and accusations. Moderation now implies treason. Mercy suggests counter-revolutionary sympathy. Compromise equals conspiracy with enemies. Henri approaches my desk with additional documents, his nervous condition now so severe that he requires both hands to carry a simple stack of papers without dropping them. "The Danton materials," he says unnecessarily. I can see the familiar red seals that mark the highest priority cases. Citizen Fouquier-Tinville wants these processed immediately. The trial begins tomorrow. Tomorrow, even for someone of Danton's stature, the machinery of justice operates with relentless speed. There will be no lengthy deliberations, no extensive examination of evidence, no careful consideration of his years of service to the Republic. The Revolutionary Tribunal has become efficient above all else, prizing speed over subtlety, quantity over careful judgment. The evidence against Danton consists primarily of testimony from former associates, transcripts of allegedly treasonous conversations, and financial records suggesting corruption. But as I read through the documents, I notice something troubling about the testimony. Many of the witnesses are themselves under investigation or have recently been arrested. Their statements read less like objective observations and more like desperate attempts to save their own lives by providing the committee with what it wants to hear. Citizen Lacroix, one of Danton's co-accused, allegedly confessed to receiving money from foreign agents. But his confession came after 3 days of interrogation in the conciergerie, under conditions that would break most men's resolve. How reliable can such testimony be? Yet it will serve as evidence in a trial that has already reached its verdict. The afternoon brings a visit from Citizen Saint-Just himself. At 27, Louis-Antoine de Saint-Just possesses an authority that seems almost supernatural in its intensity. His pale face and piercing eyes give him the appearance of a classical statue animated with terrible purpose. When he speaks, even seasoned committee members listen with respectful attention. Citizens, he addresses our office, his voice carrying the cold precision that has earned him the nickname Angel of Death. The arrest of the Dantonists marks a crucial moment in our revolution's purification. These men represented the corruption of our ideals, the softening of our resolve that would have led to counter-revolutionary triumph. He pauses, studying each of us with eyes that seem to catalogue our reactions for future reference. Their trials will demonstrate that no one, regardless of past service, stands above the justice of the people. The revolution recognizes no aristocracy of revolutionary merit. It is a chilling statement, one that effectively erases the concept of loyalty based on historical service. If Danton, who helped overthrow the monarchy and establish the Republic, can be condemned as a traitor, then no one possesses sufficient revolutionary credentials to guarantee safety. After Saint-Just's departure, I returned to processing the Danton documentation with a heavy heart. Among the papers is a letter from Danton to his young wife, Sébastienne, written just before his arrest. Unlike Hébert's private correspondence, which revealed doubt and fear, Danton's letter maintains his characteristic defiance even in the face of death. My dear wife, it reads, "They come for me tonight, as I knew they would. I do not fear death. I have sent too many others to their fate to claim such privilege now. But I fear for France, for what we have become in our pursuit of purity. The revolution I helped birth has grown into something I no longer recognize, a monster that devours virtue and vice with equal appetite." The letter continues with reflections on the early days of the revolution, when hope seemed limitless and the future appeared bright with possibility. We believed we could perfect humanity through politics. Danton wrote, "Perhaps that was our greatest error, the assumption that terror could purify, that fear could inspire virtue." Such words from a man facing execution carry particular weight. Danton is not speaking from ignorance of revolutionary justice. He helped create it. His insights come from the unique perspective of an architect witnessing the destruction of his own creation. As I work through the evening, copying names and charges with my usual mechanical precision, I find myself thinking about the arc of our revolution. We began with such noble aspirations: liberty, equality, fraternity. We sought to create a society based on reason and virtue, free from the corruptions of the old regime. Yet somewhere along the way, our methods began to contradict our goals. We used tyranny to create freedom, fear to inspire virtue, death to celebrate life. Each compromise seemed necessary at the time, each harsh measure justified by circumstance. But the compromises accumulated, the harsh measures became routine, and now we find ourselves in a place none of us intended to reach. The evening's work includes processing information about Danton's associates, men I recognize from the early days of the Revolution, Camille Desmoulins, the journalist whose pamphlets helped inspire the storming of the Bastille, Fabre d'Églantine, the playwright and politician whose artistic talents had been devoted to revolutionary causes, all now condemned as enemies of the very revolution they helped create. Desmoulins' case particularly troubles me because of his personal connection to Robespierre. The two men were childhood friends, schoolmates who had maintained their relationship through decades of political development. Desmoulins had been a witness at Robespierre's wedding, and their families had socialized regularly in happier times. Yet friendship provides no protection in our current climate. If anything, personal relationships have become additional sources of suspicion. The closer someone was to power, the more dangerous their current position. Intimacy with leaders creates opportunities for betrayal, and betrayal, real or imagined, has become our most serious crime. Desmoulins' newspaper, Le Vieux Cordelier, had recently published articles calling for moderation in the application of revolutionary justice. He argued for mercy toward prisoners, for careful examination of evidence, for recognition that the revolution's enemies had largely been defeated. Such rational arguments have been reinterpreted as counter-revolutionary propaganda. One article in particular sealed his fate. Desmoulins wrote, "It is time to return to the principles that inspired our revolution, justice tempered by mercy, strength guided by wisdom. We have proven our power to destroy. Now we must demonstrate our capacity to build." The committee interpreted these words as coded criticism of current policies, evidence of sympathy for enemies of the state. As midnight approaches, I complete my copying of the Danton materials and prepare for another sleepless night. But tonight, sleep eludes me for reasons beyond the usual anxiety. Tonight, I am haunted by a specific realization. If men like Danton and Desmoulins can be condemned as traitors, then the revolution has lost all connection to its original meaning. We have created a system where virtue is measured only by the enthusiasm with which one supports the latest purge, where loyalty is demonstrated through the eagerness with which one denounces former friends. The revolution has become a perpetual motion machine, generating its own enemies to maintain its momentum. Outside my window, Paris lies quiet under the winter stars. Somewhere in the city, other clerks work through the night, processing other lists, documenting other lives that will end tomorrow. The machinery of terror operates around the clock, efficient and relentless. Tomorrow, Danton will face the revolutionary tribunal. His voice, which once roused the nation to revolutionary action, will be silenced forever, and the revolution will continue feeding on its own children, growing stronger through each act of self-consumption. I blow out my candle and sit in darkness, wondering how long it will be before the revolution comes full circle, before the last survivors turn on each other in a final feast of ideological purity. Perhaps that is the revolution's true destination, not the perfect society we envisioned, but the perfect silence that comes when all dissenting voices have been eliminated. The scratching of distant quills continues through the night, a sound that has become the soundtrack of our republic of virtue. The ink dried, the names remained, and as the silence deepened, I began to wonder how many more would be written, and when my own hand might tremble.
You've been listening to The Sleeping Archive. Sleep well. History will wait.